My name is Nigel, 28 years old, and I've spent my entire life in the shadow of my perfect older brother. For years, I silently transferred money to support my parents, while they praised only him. Tonight at dinner, when they chuckled that I would never measure up to Michael, something finally snapped inside me. I stood up, looked them straight in the eyes, and said words I had been swallowing for decades. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against your own family. Growing up in suburban Philadelphia, the contrast between my brother Michael and me couldn't have been more stark. 4 years, my senior Michael possessed a natural charisma that drew people to him like moths to a flame. He walked into rooms and commanded attention without effort. His laugh was louder, his stories more captivating, his presence simply bigger than mine in every way. Our childhood home told the story clearly through the photographs lining the hallway. Michael scoring the winning touchdown at his high school championship game. Michael being crowned prom king. Michael shaking hands with the mayor at a youth leadership conference. My achievements, honor roll certificates, math competition trophies, perfect attendance awards, gathered dust in a box in the attic. When Michael turned 16, our parents surprised him with a bright red convertible despite his mediocre grades and multiple fender benders with Mom's car. 2 years later, when I reached the same milestone, I received bus passes and a lecture about responsibility. "We know you understand the value of independence," Dad said, patting my shoulder. "Michael needs more support to thrive." Christmas mornings played out with depressing predictability. Michael would tear through stacks of extravagant gifts. Gaming consoles, designer clothes, the latest technology. I would receive practical items, socks, educational books, savings, bonds. "You're the responsible one," Nigel, Mom would say, as if my practicality was a personality trait rather than their expectation. The pattern continued during our school years. Michael played football, basketball, and ran track. My parents never missed a game, rearranging work schedules and canceling plans to cheer from the stands. Meanwhile, when I qualified for the state mathematics competition in my junior year, neither parent attended. Mom had a hair appointment. She simply couldn't reschedule, and Dad needed to help Michael prepare for a college interview. "Your brother needs this support," Mom explained when I expressed disappointment. "You're naturally gifted at academics, Nigel. Michael has to work harder for his opportunities." The irony was that I worked tremendously hard for my achievements. Late nights studying, weekends spent on extra credit projects, all while maintaining a part-time job at the local library. Michael coasted through school on charm and the occasional all-nighter, his mediocre transcript boosted by his athletic accomplishments. Senior year brought college application season. Michael had already been accepted to State University on a partial athletic scholarship, though he'd barely maintained the minimum GPA requirement. When my acceptance letter arrived from Princeton with a substantial merit scholarship, my parents' response was lukewarm at best. "Princeton is very expensive, even with that scholarship," Dad cautioned. "State University would be more practical." "But Michael goes to State," Mom added. "Wouldn't it be wonderful for you two to be together again?" I chose Princeton despite their concerns declaring accounting as my major. This decision provoked another round of disappointment. Michael was studying business entrepreneurship, a visionary field according to our father. "Accounting is so limited," Mom said, wrinkling her nose. "Why not follow your brother's path? He's going to change the world with his ideas." College widened the gap between my life and Michael's. While he joined fraternities and became the social king of State University, I worked 3 jobs between classes: campus bookstore in the mornings, library assistant afternoons, and weekend shifts at a local restaurant. Every penny went toward tuition and living expenses that my scholarship didn't cover. Meanwhile, Michael's social media showcased an endless stream of parties, spring break trips, and new cars. Our parents supplemented his partial scholarship, generously ensuring he could focus on the full college experience without the burden of employment. When I came home for Christmas during sophomore year, exhausted from finals and multiple jobs, I found Michael lounging on the couch, regaling our parents with stories of his latest campus adventure. "Nigel, you look terrible," Mom commented when she finally noticed me. College shouldn't be all work and no play. Why can't you enjoy yourself like Michael does? I bit my tongue, unpacked my perfect GPA report in silence, and watched as it was glanced at briefly before being set aside in favor of Michael's tales of fraternity pranks and dating conquests. By graduation, I had secured a position at Wilson & Associates, a respected accounting firm in Philadelphia. I walked across the stage with summa cum laude, honors student government distinctions, and zero debt thanks to my scholarship and relentless work ethic. My parents attended the ceremony but left immediately after to catch the second half of Michael's intramural football game back at State. He had failed 2 classes that semester and would need an extra year to graduate. "Your brother really needs our support right now," Dad explained as they hurried away. "He's going through a tough time. You understand. You've always been the strong one." I watched them leave, diploma in hand, wondering if I would ever be the priority in their eyes. After graduation, I moved into a modest apartment in downtown Philadelphia and began my career at Wilson & Associates. The work was demanding but rewarding, and for the first time in my life I felt valued for my abilities. My analytical mind, attention to detail, and work ethic, the very traits my family had dismissed, made me stand out among the new hires. 6 months into my job, I received the first call from my parents. It came on a Tuesday evening as I was reviewing client files for the next day's meetings. "Nigel, sweetie," Mom began her voice, carrying that particular tone that immediately put me on edge. "We hate to ask, but we're in a bit of a situation." The situation, as it turned out, was Michael. He had finally graduated after his 5th year at State University, only to discover that jobs weren't simply handed to him based on charm. His first business venture, a campus food delivery app that arrived 2 years after established companies had cornered the market, had failed spectacularly. "He just needs a small loan to get back on his feet," Dad explained. "Nothing major, maybe $2,000. Just until his next big idea takes off." I hesitated. My starting salary was decent but not extravagant. Between rent, student loan payments for the portion not covered by scholarships, and building an emergency fund, $2,000 represented a significant chunk of my savings. "Can't he get a temporary job?" I suggested. "Even something part-time would help cover his expenses while he figures things out." Mom's gasp was audible through the phone. "Your brother is an entrepreneur, Nigel. He can't waste his talents stocking shelves or waiting tables. That might have been fine for you during college, but Michael has a different path." The familiar sting of the comparison hit home. Different path indeed, one paved with their unconditional support, and apparently my money. I transferred the funds the next day, telling myself it was a one-time assistance to help family. I cut back on groceries, canceled my gym membership, and put off buying the new winter coat I needed. 3 months later, the pattern repeated. This time, Michael had an unmissable opportunity to invest in a friend's startup. $4,000 would secure him a position that would definitely return tenfold within 6 months. Again, I transferred the money, dipping into my emergency fund. By the end of my first year at work, these temporary financial assists had become monthly occurrences. Michael's car needed repairs. Michael's rent was late. Michael needed seed money for his next venture, selling customized athletic wear that was guaranteed to be the next big trend. Each time the requests came couched in family obligation and wrapped in the implicit comparison. If only Michael had your head for numbers, he wouldn't need help. Michael's taking risks to achieve greatness, not playing it safe like accounting. The backhanded compliments stung while extracting more of my income. Meanwhile, my career progressed steadily. I received my first promotion 18 months in, becoming the youngest senior accountant in the firm's history. The accompanying raise was substantial, but my parents' financial needs seemed to expand proportionally with my income. "We're so proud of you, honey," Mom said when I shared the news of my promotion. Her next sentence came without pause. "By the way, Michael's new business partner backed out last minute. He needs $14,000 to secure the commercial space before someone else takes it. You're doing so well now. Surely you can help your brother achieve his dreams too." I worked longer hours, took on additional clients, and sacrificed any semblance of a personal life. My apartment remained sparsely furnished. My wardrobe consisted of the minimum professional attire required for client meetings. I brought lunch from home every day, usually peanut butter sandwiches or instant noodles, while my colleagues enjoyed restaurants. Over the next 3 years, I calculated that I had transferred exactly $87,432 to my parents' account. Each transfer was documented in my meticulous records, along with the stated purpose. Not once had any of that money been repaid, nor had any of Michael's ventures succeeded enough to offer returns. During one Sunday call with my parents, I gently broached the subject of Michael finding steady employment to supplement his entrepreneurial pursuits. "Oh, you know your brother isn't cut out for the 9-to-5 grind like you are," Mom replied dismissively. "His mind works differently. He sees possibilities where others see limitations. Besides," Dad added, "he's networking constantly. Those connections will pay off big someday. You'll see." What I did see was my bank account draining month after month while Michael's social media showcased vacations in Cancun, new designer clothes, and nights out at exclusive clubs, all while supposedly struggling financially. The most revealing moment came during a cousin's wedding. Aunt Sylvia approached me during the reception, champagne in hand. "Your parents were just telling me how worried they are about you," she confided. "Always working, never taking vacations. They said you're so tight with money they worry you'll never enjoy life. Not like Michael. Now there's a young man who knows how to live." I nearly choked on my drink. The narrative my parents had constructed painted me as a joyless workaholic hoarding my earnings, while Michael, living lavishly on my sacrifices, was portrayed as the free spirit they admired. That evening I called my college friend Jason, the only person who truly understood my family dynamic. "They're using you, Nige," he said bluntly. "Has it occurred to you that your money might not even be going where they claim? Have you ever seen proof of these businesses Michael supposedly starts?" I hadn't. Each request came with elaborate stories and promises, but never documentation. Still, I couldn't bring myself to cut off my family financially. What if they really did need the money? What if Michael was on the verge of success, and my support would make the difference? The transfers continued even as resentment built. I moved to a slightly larger apartment only because working from home during tax season made my studio impractical. I bought a reliable used car only after public transportation schedule changes made commuting to client sites too difficult. Every minor improvement to my life came with guilt and justification, while Michael's extravagance continued unquestioned. This was my reality for 5 years after college. Success at work, financial strain at home, and the constant nagging feeling that I would never measure up to my brother in my parents' eyes, no matter how much money I sent their way. By my 27th birthday, I had been promoted twice more at Wilson & Associates, becoming the youngest manager in the firm's 50-year history. My client portfolio included several major businesses in Philadelphia, and partners had begun mentioning a potential fast track to junior partner, a position usually reserved for accountants with at least 15 years of experience. Mr. Thompson, the managing partner who had taken an interest in my career, called me into his office after I completed a particularly challenging audit that saved a manufacturing client millions in potential tax penalties. "Nigel, your work is exceptional," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "But I'm concerned about your hours. Nobody should consistently be the first to arrive and last to leave. When was your last vacation?" I couldn't remember. Each year I accumulated vacation days and cashed them out instead of using them. The extra money went straight to my parents' ever-increasing needs. "You'll burn out at this rate," Mr. Thompson warned. "Take some time off. The firm will survive without you for a week." That same afternoon I was picking up coffee at the shop across from our office building when I accidentally bumped into a woman waiting for her order, nearly spilling her drink. "I'm so sorry," I apologized, reaching for napkins. "Let me buy you a replacement." "No harm done," she replied with a warm smile. "But I'll take a rain check on that coffee." Her name was Rachel, a graphic designer at the marketing agency 2 floors below my office. We chatted while waiting for our orders, and I found myself accepting her invitation to cash in that rain check the following day. Coffee with Rachel became the highlight of my week, then expanded to lunch breaks and eventually dinner. She was creative, funny, and genuinely interested in my work, a novel experience compared to my family's dismissal of my career. During our third dinner date, Rachel noticed me checking my phone, repeatedly distracted by an urgent text from my mother about another financial emergency for Michael. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "You seem stressed about money, which is odd considering your position. Are accountants secretly underpaid?" I laughed, nervously unsure how to explain my financial situation without sounding pathetic. How could I admit that despite my professional success, I lived like a college student because every spare dollar went to supporting my brother's failed ventures? "Family stuff," I replied vaguely. "It's complicated." Rachel didn't press, but as we grew closer over the following months, the disparity between my income and lifestyle became impossible to hide. When she suggested a weekend trip to New York, I had to decline. The money for hotels and Broadway shows had just gone toward Michael's latest scheme, a specialty coffee shop that needed just a little more capital before opening. "Nigel, something doesn't add up," Rachel said one evening as we sat in my sparsely furnished living room. "You drive a 10-year-old car, your furniture looks like it came from a thrift store, and you check the price of everything before ordering at restaurants. Yet you're a successful accountant at a prestigious firm. Where does your money go?" Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang. Dad calling about increasing the monthly transfer because property taxes had gone up. Spring brought a family gathering to celebrate my grandfather's 80th birthday. I brought Rachel along, nervous about introducing her to my family dynamic. The party unfolded exactly as I had feared. Michael arrived late, making a grand entrance with stories of his newest business idea, a fitness app that would revolutionize home workouts. My parents hung on every word, proudly introducing him to extended family members as our entrepreneur son. I was simply our other son, the accountant. No mention of my career achievements or the fact that I had been supporting the family financially for years. During dinner, I overheard my father enthusiastically telling my uncle that he and Mom had invested their retirement savings in Michael's new venture. "It's a sure thing," Dad insisted. "Michael has really found his calling this time." Ice formed in my stomach. Their retirement savings. The same parents who called me weekly for financial assistance had funds to invest in Michael's schemes. Later that evening, as we drove home, Rachel broke the silence. "Your family treats you like you're invisible. And what was that about your parents investing in your brother's business? I thought they needed your help to make ends meet." Her observation cracked something open inside me. For the first time, I began seriously questioning the narrative I'd accepted for years. The following weekend, I reviewed 5 years of bank statements, creating a spreadsheet of every transfer to my parents, with the corresponding reason. The total made me physically ill: $146,872 since graduation. On a hunch, I cross-referenced the dates of major transfers with Michael's social media posts. The pattern was unmistakable. A $20,000 business loan coincided with Michael's photos from a 2-week European vacation. A medical emergency transfer of $8,000 matched exactly with the timing of his new sports car purchase. I called Jason, my voice shaking as I shared my discovery. "You need to stop the transfers," he said firmly. "This isn't helping family. It's enabling exploitation." "But what if they really do need the money for bills and expenses?" I countered. "I can't just cut them off completely." "Then ask for proof," Jason suggested. "Actual bills documentation. If they're being honest, they should have no problem providing it." The next day, I received a text from my mother: "Nigel, sweetheart, we're having a special family dinner this Saturday. Michael has exciting news. Be here at 6 sharp." I stared at the message, feeling the familiar mixture of obligation and dread. Another dinner celebrating Michael, another subtle comparison making me feel inadequate, likely followed by another financial request. For the first time in my adult life, I considered not going. But avoidance wouldn't solve the underlying problem. Perhaps this dinner was the opportunity I needed to finally address the situation head-on. I texted back a brief confirmation, then called Rachel. "I think it's time I stood up for myself," I told her. "Would you come with me to this family dinner for moral support?" "I'll be right beside you," she promised. "It's long overdue." That Saturday evening, as we approached my parents' house, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Something was going to change tonight. I just didn't realize how dramatically the truth would finally come to light. The familiar scent of my mother's pot roast, greeted us as Rachel and I walked up the brick pathway to my childhood home. The modest suburban house where I grew up looked different somehow. Fresher paint on the shutters, new landscaping in the front yard, a sleek television visible through the living room window that certainly hadn't been there during my last visit. "Your parents' place is lovely," Rachel commented, squeezing my hand supportively. "They've made some upgrades," I replied, noting the new patio furniture and recently installed stone walkway, all purchased presumably with money that I had sent for essential bills. Mom answered the door wearing a designer dress. I didn't recognize her hair freshly colored and styled. "Nigel, and this must be Rachel," she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheek before turning her full attention to my girlfriend. "We've heard so little about you, dear. Michael brings his dates around much more often." The comparison delivered within 10 seconds of our arrival. I caught Rachel's eye and saw her slight nod of recognition. She was witnessing firsthand what I'd described about my family dynamic. Dad emerged from his study wearing a golf shirt from an exclusive country club. "Son, good to see you." "Rachel, welcome." He gestured to the living room. "Come see our new entertainment system. 75 inches of pure clarity." I followed mechanically, noticing other new additions. Original artwork on the walls, a high-end coffee maker on the kitchen counter, plush new carpeting underfoot. All while I'd been eating ramen noodles in my apartment to afford my monthly transfers for their struggling finances. "Michael's running a bit late," Mom announced, checking her diamond-studded watch. "Another new acquisition. You know how busy he is with the new business taking off." "What business is that?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "The fitness app," Dad beamed. "It's gaining incredible traction. Investors are practically lining up." Rachel's hand found mine squeezing gently as I bit back the question of why they still needed my money if Michael's business was so successful. We sat in uncomfortable small talk for 45 minutes before the front door burst open, and Michael sauntered in wearing designer clothes and reeking of expensive cologne. "Sorry I'm late, family," he announced without actual contrition. "Had to wrap up a meeting with potential investors. They're very interested in the expansion plan." My parents practically tripped over themselves to greet him, fussing and cooing as if he were returning from war rather than arriving late to dinner. I observed silently as they took his coat, offered him a drink, and generally treated him like visiting royalty, while Rachel and I sat forgotten on the sofa. Nigel, little brother Michael, finally acknowledged me with a backslapping hug that felt more performative than affectionate. He gave Rachel an appreciative once-over. "You must be the girlfriend. Michael Thornton, pleasure to meet you. I'm sure Nigel's told you all about his successful big brother." "Actually, he's told me quite a bit about you," Rachel replied with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dinner was served on new china that I didn't recognize, with expensive wine poured into crystal glasses. Throughout the meal, my parents and Michael dominated the conversation, discussing his business prospects, the famous people who were allegedly interested in investing, and the incredible lifestyle brand he was building. Not once did they ask about my work, my recent promotion, or anything related to my life. Rachel attempted to mention my achievements several times, only to be interrupted by more Michael-centric conversation. "We have exciting news," Mom announced as she served dessert. Michael's app has been featured in Tech Entrepreneur magazine's Startups to Watch section. They're doing a family profile next month. "We're so proud," Dad added, raising his glass. "He's really making a name for himself." Michael beamed, soaking in the praise. "It's been a challenging journey, but when you have the vision, success is inevitable." "If only your brother had your ambition," Mom said with a chuckle, glancing at me. "Nigel's always been content with his little accounting job, playing it safe." "Not everyone can be a visionary," Michael added condescendingly. "Someone has to crunch the numbers, right, little brother?" Dad joined their laughter. "You'll never be as good as your brother in business, Nigel, but that's okay. We still love you." The room seemed to go silent around me as something inside finally snapped. Years of suppressed resentment, financial strain, and emotional neglect crystallized into perfect clarity. Rachel's hand found my knee under the table, a silent gesture of support. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Then tell him to pay all the bills, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I'm not sending money anymore. The laughter died instantly. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. What are you talking about? She asked, genuinely confused. What money? Her confusion seemed sincere, which only confused me in return. The money I've been sending for years. For emergencies, for Michael's businesses, for household expenses. Mom looked genuinely perplexed. Nigel, what are you talking about? We never received a single dollar from you. The room fell into stunned silence. I pulled out my phone, opening my banking app to display the long history of transfers. $146,872 over 5 years, I said, turning the screen toward them. Every transfer documented. Every call for financial help recorded in my calendar. Dad's face drained of color as he stared at the screen. We never asked you for money, son. Not once. My gaze shifted to Michael, whose expression had transformed from smugness to something far more revealing. Panic. You've been intercepting the money, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. All those calls about emergencies, business investments, medical bills, they came from you, not Mom and Dad. Michael stood abruptly, knocking over his wine glass. This is ridiculous. Nigel's making things up because he's jealous of my success. Then explain these, I challenged, scrolling through the transfer history. Everyone sent to our parents' account number, the same account you've had access to since college. Mom looked back and forth between us, confusion, giving way to dawning horror. Michael, is this true? Of course not, he blustered, but his eyes darted nervously around the room. Nigel's always been jealous of me. He's trying to turn you against me because his girlfriend probably realized what a boring loser he is. Rachel stood beside me. I've seen the bank statements. I've watched Nigel sacrifice everything to support his family. He lives like a college student despite his success, because every spare penny goes to you. Dad's hands were shaking as he reached for my phone. May I? He asked quietly. I handed it to him, watching as he scrolled through 5 years of transactions, his expression growing increasingly grave. These match our account number, he said, finally, voice barely above a whisper. But we never saw these deposits. Because Michael removed them as soon as they arrived, I explained. He has online access to your account, remember? You gave it to him in college so he could deposit his paychecks from that summer job. The job he quit after 2 weeks, Dad murmured, the memory visibly dawning on him. Mom's eyes widened as another realization hit. The calls about emergencies, we never made those calls. Michael's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is insane. You're all turning against me over some numbers on a screen, after everything I've done for this family. What exactly have you done, Michael? I asked quietly. Other than take and take while contributing nothing. I'll show you what I've done, he shouted, storming toward the door. You'll all be sorry when my business takes off and I don't share a penny of it with any of you. The front door slammed behind him, leaving a ringing silence in the dining room. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. I don't understand. All this time, all that money. Check your account statements, I suggested gently. Look at the deposits and immediate withdrawals. Dad was already pulling out his phone, logging into their bank account with shaking fingers. His face grew increasingly pale as he scrolled through the history. They're all here, he whispered. Deposits from Nigel, withdrawals the same day to accounts I don't recognize. He looked up at me, eyes glistening. Son, we had no idea. All these years. The confrontation I had imagined for so long was unfolding in a way I never expected. Instead of defending Michael or dismissing my concerns, my parents looked genuinely shocked and devastated. Why didn't you ever mention sending us money? Mom asked, tears streaming down her face. I thought you knew, I replied. The calls always came from your number. The emails from your address. Michael has our passwords, Dad realized aloud. He set up our email accounts, helped us with online banking. Rachel gently touched my arm. Nigel, check your phone. I glanced down to see multiple notifications, emails and texts purportedly from my parents over the years, all asking for financial assistance. I handed the phone to Dad, who scrolled through them with growing horror. These aren't from us, he confirmed, voice breaking. We never wrote any of this. Mom suddenly clutched her chest, face contorted in pain. I can't breathe, she gasped. Dad dropped the phone, rushing to her side. Linda, what's wrong? My chest, she wheezed. It hurts. Rachel immediately moved into action. Call 911, she instructed, helping Mom to lie down on the sofa. It could be a heart attack. I fumbled for my phone with suddenly clumsy fingers, dialing emergency services while Dad knelt beside Mom, holding her hand and murmuring reassurances that sounded hollow even to my ears. As we waited for the ambulance, watching my mother struggle for breath, the full weight of the evening's revelations pressed down on me. My brother hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen years of potential relationship with my parents, poisoning our family with lies and manipulation. The paramedics arrived within minutes, quickly assessing Mom before loading her into the ambulance. Dad climbed in beside her, looking suddenly old and fragile. We'll follow you to the hospital, I promised, guiding Rachel toward my car. As we drove in tense silence, Rachel reached over to squeeze my hand. Are you okay? I wasn't sure how to answer. The truth had finally emerged, but at what cost? And what happened now? I don't know, I admitted, but for the first time in years I feel like I can finally breathe. The hospital waiting room buzzed with muted conversations and the occasional overhead page for a doctor. Rachel and I sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs, my right leg bouncing with nervous energy as we waited for news about my mother. Family of Linda Thornton, a doctor in blue scrubs, finally called. I jumped to my feet. That's us. I'm her son. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, offered a reassuring smile. Your mother is stable. She experienced what we call a stress-induced cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but a warning sign. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously high, likely triggered by emotional distress. Relief washed over me. Can we see her? Briefly. She needs rest, but a short visit would be fine. She's in room 314. We found Dad sitting beside Mom's bed, holding her hand, while she rested, connected to various monitoring equipment. He looked up as we entered, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. The doctor says she'll be okay, he said quietly. They want to keep her overnight for observation. Mom stirred at the sound of voices, her eyes fluttering open. Nigel, she murmured. You're still here. Of course I am, I replied, moving to her other side. I wouldn't leave. Her fingers weakly gripped mine. After what we learned, and how we treated you, I wouldn't have blamed you. We need to talk about it, I said gently, but not now. You need to rest. Dad cleared his throat. While your mother was getting settled, I checked our bank statements on my phone. His voice cracked. He's been doing this for years, Nigel. Taking your money, lying to all of us. Mom's monitor beeped as her heart rate increased slightly. Robert, please, she whispered. Not now. Dad nodded, patting her hand. You're right. Rest now. We sat in silence for several minutes before a nurse appeared to inform us that visiting hours were ending. Dad insisted on staying overnight in the recliner beside Mom's bed while Rachel and I reluctantly prepared to leave. I'll come back first thing tomorrow, I promised, leaning down to kiss Mom's forehead, a gesture I hadn't made in years. As Rachel and I walked through the hospital parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Hope you're happy now. You've ruined everything. I showed it to Rachel, who shook her head in disbelief. Even now, he's making himself the victim. That's always been his way, I replied, tucking the phone away without responding. The following morning, Rachel and I returned to the hospital with coffee and breakfast for Dad. We found him standing in the hallway outside Mom's room, speaking quietly but intensely with a nurse. Everything okay? I asked, approaching cautiously. Dad turned, his expression grim. Michael showed up at 6 this morning. Your mother became agitated, and her blood pressure spiked again. They asked him to leave. What did he want? I asked, though I could guess. To convince your mother that this is all a misunderstanding, Dad replied, his voice uncharacteristically hard, that you're manipulating us against him out of jealousy. The nurse excused herself as Mom's doctor approached with clipboard in hand. Mr. Thornton, your wife is stable now, but I'm concerned about these blood pressure spikes. She needs to avoid stress for the next several weeks, at minimum. Dad nodded solemnly. We understand, doctor. I've prescribed medication to help manage her blood pressure, and I strongly recommend following up with a cardiologist. She continued, handing Dad a prescription. She can be discharged this afternoon if her readings remain stable. Once the doctor left, Dad turned to me with haunted eyes. I couldn't sleep last night. I kept thinking about all the years, all the money, all the ways we failed you while praising him. Dad, you didn't know. But we should have, he interrupted, voice breaking. The signs were there. Your brother hasn't held a real job since college. His businesses never produce anything tangible. Meanwhile, you've been working yourself to exhaustion living frugally, despite your success. He rubbed his eyes wearily. I checked our account history as far back as the bank's online records go. Michael has been siphoning money for years. Not just your transfers, but withdrawals from our retirement accounts, too. My stomach dropped. How much? Nearly $200,000 from our savings, Dad admitted. Always with some excuse. Temporary loans for his businesses, investment opportunities too good to pass up. None of it ever came back. Rachel placed a supportive hand on my shoulder as I absorbed this information. Have you considered legal action? She asked gently. Dad looked torn. He's still our son, but this goes beyond irresponsible behavior. This is fraud theft. A nurse appeared to let us know we could see Mom. We found her sitting up in bed, color returned to her cheeks, though her eyes remained troubled. I had them bring a cot, she said when we entered. Your father showed me the bank records on his phone. All these years you've been supporting us while we... Her voice broke. While we treated you like you weren't measuring up. Mom, you didn't know? We should have... She echoed Dad's earlier sentiment. A mother should know her children better than that. The conversation halted as a commotion erupted in the hallway. Michael's voice carried clearly through the door. That's my mother in there. You can't keep me from seeing her. Dad stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Through the window, I watched him confronting Michael, their gestures becoming increasingly animated. Should we intervene? Rachel whispered. Before I could answer, the door burst open, and Michael stormed in, Dad close behind him. Tell them, Mom, Michael demanded, moving to her bedside. Tell them, this is all a misunderstanding. Mom's heart monitor began beeping faster. Michael, please. The doctor said, I need to stay calm. You need to leave, I said firmly, stepping between him and the bed. Michael's face contorted with rage. This is your fault. You've turned them against me with your lies. The bank statements don't lie, Michael, Dad said, his voice steady despite his obvious distress. We've seen the transfers from Nigel and the withdrawals you made. I was managing the money for you, Michael insisted, investing it to secure your future. Where are these investments? I challenged. Show us the returns, the documentation. Michael's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. It's complicated. These things take time to mature. While you took vacations and bought designer clothes, Rachel observed quietly. Michael pointed an accusatory finger at her. You stay out of this. This is family business. Rachel is family to me, I replied, taking her hand. And she's seen firsthand how I've been living to support you all these years. A security guard appeared in the doorway, summoned by a nurse who had noticed the escalating situation. Is there a problem here? Yes, Dad said firmly. My son is causing a disturbance that's affecting my wife's health. He needs to leave. Michael's face registered shock at Dad's betrayal. You're choosing him over me after everything I've done for this family. What exactly have you done? Michael, Mom asked quietly from her bed. Besides, take and lie. The security guard stepped forward. Sir, I need you to come with me. This isn't over, Michael hissed as he was escorted out. You'll all come crawling back when my business takes off. After he left, Mom's monitor gradually returned to normal rhythms. The room fell into exhausted silence until a nurse came to check Mom's vitals. Your blood pressure is still elevated, she noted with concern. Try to rest. Once we were alone again, Dad sank heavily into the chair beside the bed. We need to make changes, he said, looking between Mom and me, starting with our relationship with Michael, and with you, Nigel. What kind of changes? I asked, cautiously. First, no more access to our accounts for Michael, Dad stated firmly. Second, we need to figure out how to make this right with you, though I'm not sure that's even possible after everything. I don't want repayment, I said quickly. That's not why I brought this up. We know, Mom replied softly, but there needs to be accountability and healing. As we sat together in that sterile hospital room, the full weight of years of deception hung in the air. My brother had stolen more than money. He had stolen trust, family bonds, and countless opportunities for genuine connection between my parents and me. When I get home, Dad said suddenly, I'm going to check Michael's room. He stays there sometimes when he's between apartments. There might be more evidence of what he's been doing. Mom was discharged late that afternoon. Rachel and I followed my parents home, helping Mom get settled while Dad disappeared upstairs to Michael's old bedroom. He returned 20 minutes later, his face ashen, clutching a folder. I found these hidden in the back of his closet, he said, spreading bank statements across the coffee table. Accounts we didn't know existed, credit cards in our names. I examined the documents, my accountant's eye quickly grasping the extent of the fraud. Dad, this is identity theft. He opened credit lines using your information. Mom began to cry silently while Dad's hands clenched into fists. How could he do this to us, to his own family? Because he's always gotten away with it, Rachel observed quietly. He's never faced consequences. Until now, Dad said with newfound resolve. This ends today. The weeks following my mother's hospital stay marked a profound shift in our family dynamics. For the first time in my adult life, I established clear boundaries with my parents, beginning with financial separation. No more money transfers, I explained gently but firmly, as we sat in their living room the weekend after Mom came home. Not because I don't want to help, but because we need to break this cycle. Dad nodded solemnly. We understand, son. It's long overdue. The financial reckoning was swift and painful. My parents discovered credit card debt exceeding $70,000 across multiple accounts Michael had opened using their information. Their retirement savings had been decimated by his unauthorized withdrawals, leaving them with barely enough to cover 6 months of living expenses. We'll need to sell the house, Dad concluded after meeting with their financial advisor. Downsize to something we can actually afford. What about legal action against Michael? I suggested, the words still strange and painful to speak aloud. Mom's face crumpled. He's still our son, Nigel. A son who stole from you and damaged your health, Rachel pointed out gently. She had become an unexpected source of strength through this ordeal, her outside perspective helping all of us see the situation more clearly. Dad sighed heavily. We've filed police reports about the identity theft and fraud. The detectives said they'll investigate, but it's our decision whether to press charges if they find enough evidence. While my parents grappled with these difficult decisions, I focused on rebuilding my own life without the financial drain that had defined it for years. The first step was meeting with a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Dr. Marshall, a soft-spoken woman with penetrating eyes, helped me recognize patterns I'd been blind to for decades. You've been the family scapegoat, she explained during our third session, while simultaneously serving as the family rescuer. It's a common but devastating role. I just wanted their approval, I admitted. To be seen as valuable as Michael. And now that the truth is out, how do you feel? Angry, I confessed. Relieved. Guilty for feeling relieved. Worried about my parents. Uncertain about the future. All perfectly normal reactions, she assured me. The question now is, what boundaries do you need to maintain your well-being going forward? Those boundaries took shape gradually. I visited my parents weekly but declined to be involved in their financial decisions. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to my parents, with the strict understanding that they weren't to share it with Michael. I began saying no to requests that felt uncomfortable or exploitative. Professionally, my focus improved dramatically, once free from constant financial anxiety. Mr. Thompson noticed the change immediately. Whatever weight you were carrying seems lighter, he observed during our monthly review. It shows in your work and client interactions. I've resolved some long-standing family issues, I explained vaguely. He nodded approvingly. Well, it's opened a path to that junior partnership we discussed. The board is impressed with your client retention rates and analytical innovations. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, money that for the first time I could allocate toward my own future rather than Michael's fictitious businesses. Rachel and I celebrated with dinner at an upscale restaurant I would have previously considered an extravagant waste. To your success, she toasted, clinking her glass against mine, and to finally enjoying the fruits of your labor. As my life improved, the consequences of Michael's actions began catching up with him. Word spread through the extended family about his deception, eroding the network of admirers and enablers he had cultivated for years. Aunt Sylvia, who had once praised Michael's vibrant lifestyle, called me directly. I had no idea what was really happening, she said, sounding genuinely contrite. The story your parents told everyone was so different from reality. They didn't know either, I reminded her. Michael manipulated all of us. Still, we should have seen through it. The signs were there. She paused. Your cousin Timothy is looking for an accountant for his construction business. Would you be interested in meeting with him? Similar calls came from other family members. Apologies, reconnections, and a newfound respect I had never experienced before. Michael, meanwhile, found himself without his usual safety nets. His social media posts grew increasingly desperate as fair-weather friends disappeared once the flow of expensive outings and gifts dried up. The investors he had boasted about vanished when my parents stopped providing funds through me. 3 months after the confrontation, my parents received a notice that Michael was being investigated for fraud related to investment solicitation for non-existent businesses. Several acquaintances had filed complaints after losing money in his schemes. He called asking for bail money, Dad told me during Sunday dinner. I said no. The simple statement represented an enormous shift in my father's approach to Michael. For the first time, he was allowing natural consequences to unfold, rather than rushing to the rescue. How did he take it? I asked carefully. Not well, Dad admitted. He accused us of abandoning him when he needs us most. Said if we really loved him, we'd help him one last time. The same manipulation tactics he's always used, Rachel observed. Mom nodded sadly. We see it now. All these years we thought we were supporting his dreams. Instead, we were enabling his worst behaviors while neglecting you. Their recognition of the pattern brought a complicated mixture of validation and grief. I was finally being seen clearly, but the circumstances were heartbreaking for all of us. My parents sold their house in August, moving to a modest condominium that better matched their actual financial situation. The process of downsizing forced them to confront the materialistic values that had partially fueled the family dysfunction. We don't need all this stuff, Mom realized as we packed boxes. We spent so much time trying to keep up appearances, impressing people with things bought with money we didn't even have. Dad discovered renewed purpose through the crisis, volunteering at a financial literacy program for seniors. If I can help one person avoid what happened to us, something good will have come from this mess, he explained. Michael's legal troubles culminated in a plea deal, probation and restitution rather than jail time contingent on therapy and steady employment. The court ordered him to repay his victims and attend financial responsibility classes. He appeared at my parents' new condo one evening in October, looking nothing like the confident, charismatic brother I remembered. His designer clothes had been replaced by worn jeans and a faded sweatshirt, his normally perfect hair grown out and unkempt. They want me to apologize to everyone I've hurt, he explained awkwardly, when my parents called to tell me he was there, part of the therapy program. I drove over with Rachel, uncertain what to expect, but knowing this conversation was necessary for my own healing process. Michael sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped between his knees. I'm sorry, he began, reciting the words like a reluctant schoolboy. I took advantage of all of you. I lied and manipulated to get what I wanted. Why? I asked simply. Why the elaborate deception? Why not just work for what you wanted like everyone else? He looked genuinely confused by the question. Because that's too hard. I'm not like you, Nigel. Things don't come easily to me. Nothing came easily to me. I corrected him. I worked for everything I achieved. The difference is, I actually did the work instead of stealing and lying. Michael had no response to that, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Are you actually sorry, or just sorry you got caught?" Rachel asked pointedly. "Both, I guess," he admitted with surprising candor. "I never thought about the harm I was causing. It just seemed easier to take from Nigel. He always had it together. I figured he could afford it. While I lived paycheck to paycheck, sacrificing everything to send money I thought was helping our parents," I said, the old anger resurfacing. Michael nodded miserably. "The counselor says I have narcissistic tendencies, that I only saw how things affected me, not others." It wasn't a satisfying explanation for years of deception, but it was perhaps the most honest Michael had ever been with any of us. Dad cleared his throat. "We're willing to support your recovery, Michael, but not financially, and not without accountability." "I know," Michael replied quietly. "I have to earn trust back. The therapist says it might take years if it happens at all." As we left that evening, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not forgiveness, that seemed premature, but perhaps the first step toward a new type of relationship with my brother. One based in reality, rather than manipulation and deception. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked as we drove home. "I think I will be," I replied. "For the first time in years, everyone is seeing the situation clearly. That's its own kind of healing." November brought Thanksgiving, the first holiday since the truth had emerged. My parents hosted in their new modest condo, with Rachel and me bringing most of the food. Michael attended briefly, still awkward and subdued, bringing a store-bought pie and making halting conversation before leaving early for his therapy-mandated support group. As we sat around the table, Dad raised his glass. "I'm thankful for truth this year. Painful as it's been, living honestly is better than comfortable deception." Mom reached for my hand. "And I'm thankful for second chances. Nigel, we failed you for so many years. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to make amends." The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes, the validation I had sought for decades finally given freely and sincerely. "To new beginnings," Rachel added, squeezing my other hand. For the first time in memory, I felt truly seen within my family, not as Michael's less impressive brother, not as the reliable source of financial support, but as Nigel, valued, respected, and finally understood for who I actually was. 6 months after that fateful dinner confrontation, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. The most visible change was my living situation. Rachel and I had moved in together, purchasing a comfortable townhouse in a vibrant Philadelphia neighborhood. After years of deprivation, I finally allowed myself to enjoy the fruits of my hard work, creating a home that reflected both our personalities. "Remember your old apartment?" Rachel teased as we arranged furniture in our new living room, the fold-out sofa and the wobbly kitchen table, and the leaky faucet I never fixed because the money for the plumber always went to my parents. I added, able to laugh about it now. Our home became a sanctuary, the first place I'd lived that truly felt like mine, unburdened by financial strain or family obligation. Simple pleasures I'd denied myself for years now brought genuine joy: quality groceries, occasional restaurant meals, weekend trips to nearby cities, even starting a modest investment account for our future. My relationship with my parents evolved into something healthier than I'd ever experienced. Without Michael's manipulation and the financial dependence, we discovered common ground and genuine appreciation for each other. Dad and I bonded over weekend fishing trips, while Mom took sincere interest in my career achievements. "We're getting to know each other for the first time," Mom observed during one Sunday visit. "All those years we never really saw you clearly." Their financial situation stabilized gradually. Dad found part-time work as a consultant in his old industry, while Mom sold handcrafted jewelry at local markets, a hobby she'd abandoned years ago when Michael's demands consumed their resources. They lived modestly but sustainably free from the cycle of deception that had characterized the previous decade. Michael's journey proved more complicated. The court-mandated therapy revealed deeper issues than anyone had suspected, not just narcissistic tendencies, but profound insecurity masked by grandiose behavior. Without the constant validation and financial support he'd relied on, he struggled to establish a functional adult life. "He's working at a warehouse now," Dad reported during one of our regular calls. "First steady job he's ever kept for more than a month." "How's he doing with it?" I asked, surprised to find I genuinely wanted to know. "Struggling with the authority structure, but showing up consistently. His therapist says that's significant progress." Our direct interactions remained limited and cautious. Occasional family gatherings where we exchanged polite but distant conversation. Brief text messages on birthdays or holidays. The trust destroyed by years of deception couldn't be rebuilt quickly, if ever. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him completely?" Rachel asked one evening as we discussed the upcoming Easter dinner where Michael would be present. I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting or allowing someone back into a position where they can hurt you again. I can forgive the past while maintaining boundaries for the future. This perspective, the ability to separate forgiveness from vulnerability, represented my greatest personal growth. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Marshall helped me recognize and address patterns established since childhood, the people-pleasing, the excessive responsibility, the seeking of validation through sacrifice. "You've internalized the family narrative, that your worth comes from what you provide for others," she observed during one particularly insightful session. "Real self-worth comes from within, not from external validation." Learning to prioritize my needs without guilt became my ongoing work. Small steps at first, saying no to optional overtime, setting aside personal time for hobbies, expressing preferences without apology. Each boundary established and maintained strengthened my sense of self. Professional success followed naturally from this newfound balance. The junior partnership materialized earlier than expected, bringing not just financial rewards, but recognition of my contributions to the firm. Mr. Thompson became a mentor rather than just a boss, guiding my development with genuine interest. "You've found your voice," he commented, after I confidently presented a controversial but sound tax strategy to a major client, not just technically but as a leader. The greatest joy, however, came through my relationship with Rachel. Without the constant drain of family obligations, I could fully invest in our future together. Weekend hikes, cooking classes, planning a trip to Europe, all the normal activities of a couple in love that had once seemed impossibly luxurious. On a crisp autumn evening, exactly 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I proposed to Rachel during a picnic in the park where we'd had our first real date. Her joyful acceptance felt like the culmination of a journey from self-sacrifice to self-actualization. "You've changed so much this past year," she said as we celebrated with champagne later that evening. "Not your core. You've always been thoughtful and kind. But you stand taller now. You take up the space you deserve." Thanksgiving dinner that year was hosted at our home, a deliberate choice to establish new traditions. My parents arrived bearing homemade dishes and genuine warmth. Michael came too, bringing a girlfriend none of us had met before, a soft-spoken librarian named Abigail, who seemed to have a calming effect on his usually domineering personality. As we gathered around the table, I realized how profoundly different this felt from family meals of the past. No underlying tension, no performative comparisons, no hidden agendas, just people sharing food and conversation with authentic presence. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside, his expression unusually vulnerable. "I was wrong about so many things, Nigel. Focusing on your brother's flash instead of your substance, mistaking charm for character. I missed seeing the extraordinary man you were becoming." "We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "I should have spoken up sooner instead of enabling the situation." He shook his head firmly. "You were responding to patterns we established from your childhood. The responsibility was ours as parents, to see what was happening." This accountability, freely given without expectation of absolution, meant more than any apology could have. It represented a fundamental shift in how my family operated, moving from denial and deflection to honesty and responsibility. Later that evening, after everyone had left and Rachel and I were cleaning up, she noticed my contemplative mood. "Penny, for your thoughts." "I was just thinking about how different life looks now compared to a year ago," I replied, setting down the dish I was drying. "Not just the external circumstances, but how I feel inside. For so long I was trying to earn love and approval through sacrifice and support. I thought if I just gave enough, did enough, they would finally see me as equal to Michael. And now she prompted gently. Now I understand that my worth was never about comparison or contribution. It was inherent all along. I just couldn't see it. And ironically, only when I stopped trying to prove my value through constant giving did my family actually begin to see and appreciate me for who I am. Rachel wrapped her arms around me. That's the thing about healthy boundaries. They don't just protect you, they clarify your true self to others. This realization became the foundation for my approach to all relationships moving forward. Boundaries weren't selfish, they were necessary for authentic connection. Saying no wasn't rejection, it was honesty. Taking care of my own needs wasn't self-centered, it was the prerequisite for genuinely caring for others. The financial prosperity that followed my promotion, and freedom from supporting Michael, allowed us to make choices based on values rather than necessity. We established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students working while studying, something I understood intimately. We volunteered at financial literacy workshops, similar to the one Dad had joined. Mom and Dad gradually rebuilt their retirement savings with my occasional guidance, but never my financial intervention. Michael continued his therapy and steady employment, the flash and manipulation, giving way to a more grounded, if less spectacular, existence. Our relationship remained a work in progress, cautious rebuilding of trust through small, consistent actions rather than grand promises. The deepest healing came through recognition that family dynamics aren't fixed or faded. The patterns established in childhood, the golden child and the scapegoat, the enabler and the enabled, could be identified, challenged, and transformed, not easily or quickly, but persistently, with courage and clarity. Standing up at that dinner table a year ago wasn't just about money or fairness. It was about claiming my right to be seen accurately, to be valued appropriately, to exist as myself, rather than as a supporting character in someone else's story. In that moment of saying, "Then tell him to pay all the bills," I wasn't just addressing financial exploitation. I was reclaiming my narrative, establishing that my worth wasn't determined by what I provided, but by who I was. That's the lesson I carry forward. Self-worth isn't earned through sacrifice or achievement. It's inherent, inalienable, and most importantly, non-comparative. We don't need to diminish others to shine, nor dim our light to make others comfortable. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against your own family? It takes tremendous courage to break generational patterns and establish healthy boundaries with the people who raised you. Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the strength to speak their truth. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. And remember, your worth isn't determined by what you give, but by who you are. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand in your truth today.